How was like the overall crust of the bread and the crust of the meat? My reaction. How did it relate to the test? Carbon steel.
I can't talk right now, you guys. This is the best patty melt I've ever had. Hi everyone, I'm Claire Saffitz. Welcome to my home kitchen. Today I'm making the most perfect sandwich that I can ever think of that I love to eat. It is a diner specialty, the patty melt. Essential to making a great patty melt at home is a griddle. I'm gonna make it on my made-in carbon steel griddle. It is something I crave, I order every once in a while, and it is like the best treat that I give to myself. It is a sandwich. It's not a hamburger, but it has a lot in common with a cheeseburger. It's basically a beef patty that's thin, that's griddled, and then it's put between two slices of bread, usually rye bread, and sandwiched in there is like a bunch of cheese and caramelized onions, and the whole thing is melted together like grilled cheese and flipped over so the bread gets crisp. It's like a really messy sandwich. It's like so juicy from the beef and everything that's in there. I love anything that kind of feels like a variation on a burger with like a beef patty. I developed a recipe for it like way back when, but it's kind of endlessly versatile. And so today I'm putting a little bit of a spin on it where I'm kind of leaning into Reuben territory a little bit. So I'm gonna do a little Russian dressing, a little sauerkraut. There's already Swiss cheese on it, and some rye bread. It's gonna be so delicious. I think one of the reasons why it's not a more popular thing for people to make at home is because it does require a huge amount of cook surface, because you're cooking the onions, you're cooking the patty, you're griddling the bread. So it's really the perfect thing to make at home if you have a griddle. I think a good patty melt is distinguished mostly just by the quality of ingredients. Like I want it to be good quality beef with a good amount of fat. Today I'm using 80-20 grass-fed ground beef, so I know it's gonna be good. Rye sourdough, which is interesting. It can be seeded or unseeded. What really sets a good patty melt apart from a great one is the proportions. Like getting all the proportions right, getting the balance right, not too salty, the right amount of onions and the right amount of cheese, and the bread just keeps everything together. So it's all about construction and proportions. So ingredients. Looks like a lot. I do this variation where I'm making Russian dressing, so that's mostly what you see here. But just to go through it, I have some Swiss cheese. This is sourdough rye bread, unseeded. No, it's seeded. Oh, the package said unseeded. Some olive oil for cooking, sauerkraut, again, kind of my addition, 2 onions. For the Russian dressing, I have prepared mayonnaise, some ketchup, some prepared horseradish, a little lemon juice, a little onion powder, some sweet relish, salt and pepper, of course, and then ground beef. The number one thing is you'll need a griddle. You could make this at home with a couple of cast iron skillets, but you really do want that big wide cook surface because there's a lot to cook. So if you're making more than one sandwich, a griddle is key. I'm gonna use a kitchen scale and some parchment paper to portion out my patties. I have a box grater for grating the cheese, and that's pretty much it. Before I show you my patty melt recipe, I wanna thank our friends at Made In for sponsoring this episode. Made In is the makers of professional quality cookware for the home cook. They partner with multi-generational factories from around the world to create a full line of cookware and bakeware. It is used in thousands of top-rated restaurants around the country, including multiple 3 Michelin star restaurants. So today I could not make my patty melts without the Made In griddle. It's made in Sweden of professional grade carbon steel. It comes pre-seasoned and is naturally nonstick, so you can use it right out of the box. I love it because you get all the benefits of cast iron with even heating, but so much lighter weight. I particularly love this griddle because it works on my induction cooktop. It also works on gas, electric, and you can even take it outside and cook over live fire like I did in a video where I made breakfast sandwiches. So it's incredibly versatile and heat safe up to 1200 degrees. As you can see, my griddle is well loved. I've used it to make breakfast for a crowd, pancakes for a crowd. I love that you can use it over 2 burners or just have one on. It's so versatile. So if you want to check out the griddle and the entire line of Made In cookware, check the link below and you get a discount on your order. Okay, the first thing I'm gonna do is just make my Russian dressing because it's stirred together and then I can set it aside. Russian dressing also goes by like Thousand Island, similar, possibly exactly the same. I'm missing one thing which I couldn't find in my fridge and I was sure that I had, but I don't, and that's Worcestershire sauce. That's okay. I love this because it's so easy. I'm just gonna stir in my sweet relish. That's a 1/4 cup, a few tablespoons, 3 actually, ketchup. I'm passionate about ketchup, but not really on a hot dog, but that's for a different episode. Check that one out. A tablespoon of lemon juice. My one complaint about patty melts, is it lacks acid. Like I always want something like a little tangy to cut through something that's so rich. So the Russian dressing is nice and tangy, so I like what that brings. A full teaspoon of onion powder. I have a tablespoon of prepared horseradish. This is just like beet horseradish because that's what we had, so it's going to turn it a little pink, which is fine. And then again, if I had it, I'd be adding some Worcestershire sauce. I'm going to season this with a little salt and pepper. It's so good. What's not to love? I love Russian dressing. Side note, I have here a little bit of extra, like a tablespoon or two extra prepared mayo. This is what I'm going to spread on the outside of my bread before I griddle it. So the next thing I want to turn to is my onions, because this step takes the longest of anything else. I'm also going to preheat my griddle. Medium, medium, low. And caramelizing onions takes a long time, and you want to go pretty low on them, because otherwise you just end up making fried and also kind of burned onions. So I'm just going to get that going. And this is over 2 burners, which works out great. These are 2 medium yellow onions. I would like to bring back the patty melt. What really makes the patty melt not a burger is that it's on sliced bread. Given that it's on rye and it already has melted Swiss cheese on it, it kind of hints a little bit at the Reuben, which is also an amazing sandwich. So I'm kind of taking this into Reuben territory, and that's why I'm going Russian dressing and sauerkraut. So I think I'm gonna only cook a couple of sandwiches. The recipe below makes 4. So this is basically gonna have more onions than I need, but if you're gonna caramelize onions, you might as well caramelize a lot. Okay, so let's go over to the griddle. I'm gonna grab my oil. I just need a couple tablespoons to kind of get everything going. This is nice and hot, so I'm just gonna get a couple tablespoons of oil down. Then as the onions cook down and shrink and start to take on color, I'll move them to one side and then I can start on the other components. So I just want to keep these moving. Initially my heat is a little bit higher because I just want them to start to wilt down and release their moisture, turn translucent. But then once they get to that stage, I'm going to keep the heat a little bit lower so I get nice even cooking and coloring and I don't start to like fry or burn them anywhere. So here are my onions. They have shrunk down to, I would say, between 25 and 33% of the original volume. They're looking great. They're nice, kind of dark golden brown. I'm actually just gonna cut these in half. And to the remaining onions, I'm gonna add some sauerkraut. So I wanna sort of cook the sauerkraut down with the onions. I'm gonna add sort of 1 part sauerkraut to 2 parts onions. So about half of what I see here on the griddle. And a little of the juice. Oh, it smells so good. So I just want to cook this down a little bit. And I did season the onions with a little bit of salt to help draw out some of the water. But one thing about caramelizing onions is it's easy to over salt them if you salt at the beginning, because you see this massive amount of onions, but then it loses a ton of moisture. So sometimes they can be a little too salty at the end. So I'll season them a little bit more. So this is great because I have like the sweetness and savoriness of the onions plus the acidity from the sauerkraut. I think this is going to be really good. So again, that burner's off. This burner is on medium still. Medium, sort of medium low. All right, this is good. I'm gonna turn this off, start portioning my meat for my patties, and I'm gonna grate my cheese. I'm gonna start by grating my cheese. I'm using Swiss. You could use like a pre-sliced Swiss. That makes it really easy. I do like using grated cheese in like a grilled cheese context because I think it melts more easily. So I'm gonna go about 1.5 ounces per sandwich. In the past, I've done more like 2 ounces per sandwich, but it just gets to be a lot with like the beef fat and the onions and the dressing, the mayonnaise. So I'm gonna go a little bit lower on the cheese. So typically it's Swiss, sometimes it's cheddar, sometimes it's American, although I prefer Swiss. Okay, so that's a little over 3, that'll be fine. So I'm gonna do 5-ounce patties. I feel like if you get above 5, it starts to feel kind of thick and more burger-like, whereas for me, a patty melt should be really thin. You can adjust the weight of the patty based on the size of your bread. So, and you also want to flatten the patty to fit the dimensions of your bread and to be a little bit bigger than your bread because it does shrink down as it cooks. I'm gonna take a piece of parchment paper. Like I said at the beginning, this is an 80-20 blend, which means 80% lean, 20% fat. So if you're making all 4 sandwiches, you'll need 20 ounces total, or just under 1.5 pounds. You don't wanna work it a whole lot. You actually wanna handle it as little as possible. So I'm just gonna start to kind of work this out into a shape, again, close to the shape of my bread, but a little bit bigger. And trying to keep the thickness even, because what happens when you cook ground meat in a patty is it always wants to sort of like puff up in the center from all the juiciness. I'm gonna put a second piece on top to help me form it. So there's my first patty. Nice and even, thin. I'm gonna do my second patty, same way. So I have my 2 patties. I'm gonna season them with salt and pepper. I'm not gonna handle the raw meat anymore directly, so I can wash my hands first before I get them all in the salt. You really wanna season with dry hands, by the way, because like salt, wet hands doesn't go well together. So these are really thin, so I don't wanna salt them too much on one side. Pepper, this is very coarse pepper. And then reapplying that paper, giving them a flip, doing that other side. So I have my 2 patties, I have my bread, my cheese. Behind me I have the Russian dressing, the onions are on the griddle. We're ready to cook. The first thing I wanna do is start to cook my patties. So I'm gonna get my griddle preheating again. And I'm gonna grab my made-in griddle press. So this is perfect for the patties because it helps to ensure that I have full contact between the griddle and the meat at all times, so I can get like a good crust on it. When you cook the patties first and then on the same pan or griddle you cook the sandwiches, it's great because you get that beef fat to absorb a little bit into that other side of the bread. So the griddle's starting to release a little bit of smoke. I'm gonna put down my first patty. So I'm gonna cook these until that first side has really nice browning. It smells so beefy and delicious. I'm gonna cook it most of the way on the first side, and I'll start to see some juices pooling on the center, and the sort of outer ring will look cooked. But these are thin, so they cook fast. So after flipping onto the second side, I actually turned the griddle off because it's still pretty hot. So the patties are kind of gently finishing cooking on the second side. And now I'm gonna prep my bread. So I'm gonna grab that little bit of mayo. And there's a decent amount of beef fat on the griddle. So I'm not gonna use a lot of mayo. I'm gonna put like a very, very thin layer of just about a teaspoon total for each side. But mayo is oil and eggs primarily, and so it makes like this beautiful golden crisp shell. I'm gonna get my patties off of the griddle just for now. Set them on my cutting board. And let's see how much fat we have here. I could definitely take a little bit of this off. So I'll kind of actually just move it around and absorb it as I go. All right, so I have the griddle back on medium. You can hear it starting to sizzle. I have all 4 slices of my bread mayo side down, and I'm gonna start to build the melts. So I'm gonna start with my Russian dressing. A little on each side. I would call it probably a tablespoon per piece of bread. Starting to get a little bit golden, but I have some time. So now my Swiss cheese, a little bit on each side. The next thing is the patties are gonna go down on one side. And you can see that they shrunk and are kind of just perfectly sized for my bread. So the last component is that sauerkraut onion combo. So now I'm gonna close them up. There we go, smarter, not harder. Ooh, look at that good browning. I can see that I have melted cheese under the patty. Ooh, they look so good. Oh, that looks so good. I'm gonna turn the heat down. So now my bread is well toasted. It's nice and crispy on both sides. I know that the cheese is melted on both sides. The patty's still hot. These are done. So crispy. Now let's take a look. I really like the proportion. It's kind of like 1 to 1 to 1 to 1. Bread, patty, onion, sauerkraut, and bread again. Held together by the melted cheese. Not too much. And then of course, Russian dressing. It's sweet and tangy. It's gonna bring it all together. Can I taste it? Yeah. Mm. Good cheese pull. Mmm. The meat, medium, cooked through, still juicy. Perfect acid. It's just what I want a patty melt to be. From the Russian dressing, that like a little bit of lemon juice, the sauerkraut, the onions give it the sweetness, which works with the Russian dressing, and then the whole thing is really just about like the delicious beefy patty. And not so much fat that like if you squeeze it, you'd have it like dripping out. It holds together so well.
How was like the overall crust of the bread and the crust on the meat? Maillard reaction. How did it relate to the test? Part of the steel.
I can't talk right now, you guys. I think this is the best patty melt I've ever had. I love when bread does this, where it gets like really crispy on the outside. And then the ungriddled side that's touching the innards gets like soft because of that Russian dressing. It kind of like blends into the rest of the ingredients. So it becomes this shell. Oh, so good. Here.
What makes it so good?
Russian dressing.
Cool.
What are your notes?
I really like how the bread is crispy on one side and soft on the interior.
Did you just say that because you heard me say that exact same thing?
No, I don't be listening to you.
Oh. I literally just said that. It's the mayo on the outside.
One step closer to your
Thanks. I can take it out.
Okay, great.
Come back.
The woman knows how to cook. It's phenomenal. It's delicious.
Thanks.
It's so good.
Thanks. Isn't it kind of what you want patty melts to be? Okay, bye, Harris.
It's making me like question a bun altogether.
Oh, says the burger man.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna cut this one open.
I'm in the burger business.
Yeah, Harris is in the burger business. And I love a burger, don't get me wrong. Love. You guys are gonna love these. Truly. Okay. I'm so happy right now. That was so delicious. It really made my patty melt dreams come true. It is such an underrated sandwich. I kind of get it because it's just something that we really need that cooked surface of a griddle to make. It's so perfect in every way, and I do feel like I made it better with the Russian dressing and the sauerkraut and the acid and bringing it all together. Just so delicious. Sandwiches are complex. They're simple, yet complex at the same time, and I really feel like I nailed it. I want to thank Made In for sponsoring this episode and for making their carbon steel griddle, which I love, and which enabled me to make my favorite sandwich, the patty melt. And thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.